Welcome to a coffee chat. I'm Dr. Boomer Brown with Doing Good at Work. Well, the last few coffee chats, we've been talking about The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And so far, we've said that to be effective, one has to move from a state of dependent upon others to the middle state of independent on self, and ultimately move to interdependence, which is us. This is how we grow to become more effective in every role that we play in our life. So to do this, we work through 7 habits. The first habit was to be proactive. You have a choice. You get to choose what you focus on. Many things concern you, but you are best effective when you look at the areas where you have the greatest influence and you focus there. You can sharpen that focus with the second habit, which is beginning with the end in mind. Here's where you look at your purpose, your values, your mission, what it is that you do, and how you go about doing that. And defining that and knowing who you are as a person, as a professional, will help you to get very focused so you can choose what you focus on, choose how you respond to different stimuli, then make sure that everything is lining up, everything that you do is lining up around your purpose, your mission, your values, your goals, and how you live them out daily. Well, if you do these first 2 habits in the private, you can add this third habit. And today, I want to talk to you about making sure that you put first things first. First things first. How do you go about doing that? How do you make sure that you know what the most important things are and that you are focusing on them? Part of that happens down here, but I want to introduce you to what Dr. Covey calls Quadrant 2 living. This is Quadrant 2. I like to call this the window of life. This is how we see life. There are 2 axes here. There is the X and Y axis, of which the top one is some things are urgent. They're urgent, meaning that they must be handled immediately. Some things are not urgent. Okay? Other things are important. Okay? Other things are important. And some things are not important. Okay? Now, when you cross these 2 axes, what you get is you get urgent, important things, and we call those, if they need immediate attention and they need results, then we call those crisis. And we've all experienced crisis in our life when something happens. You know, I'm out on an interstate and suddenly a tire blows out. Well, it's urgent that I stop. It's important that I get it fixed to keep moving, so it's a crisis. Effective people learn how to lower the number of crises in their life. They won't all go away. We will always experience crisis, but we can control some of the things that lead up to a crisis to actually prevent a crisis from happening. So what do you get if you have something that's urgent, but it's not important? That sounds like an oxymoron, doesn't it? How could something be an urgent and it's not important? Well, it's urgent to someone, okay? But the results, it's not necessarily important that it be done right now. We call this the quadrant of interruption. Interruption. These things like email and text messaging and social media and people rushing into my office and saying, "Can I have a minute of your time?" It's urgent to them. It may not be urgent to me. It might be important to them, but it's not important to me, and it becomes an interruption. This happens all the time, more and more, now that we have smart watches and smartphones. All these buzzers and beepings and tones going off, our lives are constantly interrupted by things that aren't really urgent. They may be urgent to someone, but they're not really that important, but we get interrupted. Again, effective people turn these things down, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. What about the quadrant where it's not urgent and it's not important? Well, Dr. Covey calls this the quadrant of waste. We waste a lot of time doing non-urgent, not important things. Things that are not getting us moving toward our end goal. Things that we do that are not proactive. We waste time, and we have crisis in our life, we have interruptions, and we waste time, and we're not as effective as we can be. So the goal here is to turn down the number of crises, turn down the interruption, control so that we don't waste, so that maybe less than 20% of our time goes into that, 20% of our time goes into this, and maybe 20% of our time goes in that. We're always trending down in these, 10 to 20%. So what's this quadrant right here? This is quadrant 2. This is the one Dr. Covey encourages us, and I encourage you to live in this quadrant. It's not urgent, but it's important. This is what we call the planning quadrant. So we plan. When we stop, it's not urgent. It is important that every week, every day, every month, every year, you carve out some time, because these are important things if we're going to reach the end that we have in mind. If we're going to be proactive in our private lives, then we need to plan. We need to spend 30% or more of our time planning, because if we plan, we can take preventive actions to avoid crisis. We can plan how we need to handle social media, our cell phones, our smart watches, people, so that don't interrupt. We can give them certain behavior patterns that we'd like for them to follow, when I'll answer email, when I'll check my phone, when it's a good time to have a conversation. We can plan some rest time. Maybe that's not waste, but we cannot let time get away from us if we put a plan in place. So, in today's coffee chat, I want to encourage you to take some time to plan your life, to spend some quadrant 2 time, so you can turn down each one of these quadrants. You can get really focused on what you have in mind to end at, and to be proactive. Now, next time you come back, we'll move out of the private space, moving from dependent to independent, and then we'll move toward interdependence when we get into the 3 remaining public habits. All right? Thanks for joining me on a coffee chat this week, and as always, I look forward to seeing you on a coffee chat next week.